My name's Maya Sterling, and I'm 22 years old. Today was supposed to be the day I celebrated 4 years of late nights and straight A's. But instead, I stood on the university lawn in my graduation gown and realized my parents had traded my future for my sister's latest whim. I watched my father hand my sister the keys to a brand new luxury SUV, bought with the $80,000 college fund that was supposed to pay off my student loans, and tell her she deserved a head start. They told me I was the smart daughter who could figure it out, and that my sister was sensitive and needed the help. They had no idea that while they were smiling for photos and bragging to their friends about their perfect family, I was making one phone call to the benefactor who actually holds the deed to their prestigious lifestyle. Before I tell you exactly how their world fell apart before the graduation caps even hit the ground, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story earns it. Also, drop your city and local time in the comments. I like knowing who's out there. Let me take you back to the beginning. Not to this morning, not to the ceremony, not to the red bow on that ivory SUV. I need to take you back much further than that, because what happened today did not arrive without a history. It was built brick by brick over 22 years, and if you want to understand the phone call, you need to understand the house that made it necessary. I grew up in a four-bedroom colonial in a suburb that measured itself in appearances, the kind of neighborhood where the lawn said something about your character, and the car in the driveway said something about your future, and the way your children behaved at the block party said something about whether you were the kind of family worth knowing. My parents, Richard and Diane Sterling, were exceptional at being the kind of family worth knowing. At church on Sundays, my father was generous, well-spoken, a man who remembered every name and shook every hand, and positioned himself near the pastor at coffee hour with the reliability of someone who understood that proximity to authority is its own form of currency. My mother organized the fall charity auction for 11 consecutive years. She wore coordinating outfits. She laughed at the right volume. She sent handwritten thank you notes within 48 hours of every dinner party, every gift, every favor received. They had two daughters, in the story they told at church and at the country club, and in the Christmas card they sent every December, the one with the professional photo, everyone in complimentary blues and creams. Those daughters were their greatest achievement. The story they told was very clean. The daily life behind it was more complicated. Bella was 3 years older than me, and from the earliest age I can clearly remember, she occupied a different atmospheric pressure inside our home. When Bella was unhappy, the whole house reorganized itself around that unhappiness, my parents calibrating their voices and their movements to her mood, the way you'd adjust the temperature of a room for someone running a fever. When Bella was content, there was a specific exhale in the house, a lightness, the relief of people who had been managing something difficult and could briefly set it down. When I was unhappy, the house generally continued as it was. I want to give you a specific memory, because specific memories are honest than summaries. I was 11 years old. I had entered the district science fair with a water filtration project I had spent 6 weeks building. Real weeks, real work, 2 trips to the hardware store, 3 notebooks filled with measurements, nights past 10 getting the data right. I won first place in my age category. My teacher called the house on a Thursday afternoon with the results, and I answered the phone, and I remember the physical feeling of that moment, the way pure joy at 11 years old lives in your chest and your hands simultaneously, the way it needs to go somewhere. I ran into the kitchen to tell my mother. She was unloading the dishwasher. She listened, she nodded, she said, "That's wonderful, honey," in the tone of someone confirming that the dry cleaning was ready. 40 minutes later, Bella came home from school in tears over a boy in her grade who had not invited her to his birthday party. The house transformed. My mother sat with her at the kitchen table. My father came home and was briefed at the door in a low voice. A special dinner was ordered, Bella's favorite from the Italian place, the one with the candles in the window. And the entire conversation that evening was a sustained, careful effort to help Bella locate her worth again. The blue ribbon from the science fair was sitting on the kitchen counter the whole time. Nobody mentioned it. I ate my pasta and looked at that ribbon and practiced the thing I was already learning to do at 11 years old. I learned to take up less space, to compress my needs down to a size that didn't create inconvenience, didn't invite comparison, didn't require the room to reorient toward me when it was already pointed somewhere else. I was good at it. I got better at it every single year. By 13, I had stopped expecting acknowledgement and started simply noting its absence, the way you note weather, not with bitterness, just as information about what to prepare for. By 15, I had built a life inside that house that ran almost entirely on its own internal logic, independent of my parents' attention, fueled by a private certainty that what I was building mattered, even if no one in that house was watching me build it. My parents called me the reliable one. They called me the shark. They said it warmly, the way you describe a child you're proud of, and I think they genuinely meant it as a compliment. What they meant was, she can handle anything. She's wired differently. She doesn't require the scaffolding. What it translated to in practice was, the resources can go elsewhere. I want to give you one more memory before I move forward, because this one is the one I kept returning to during my years at university, whenever I needed to remember exactly what I was building toward, and exactly why I was building it alone. I was 16. I had been accepted to a competitive academic summer program at a university 4 states away, the kind that required a formal application, 2 recommendation letters, and a demonstrated academic record that I had spent 3 years curating specifically for opportunities like this. I found out on a Thursday evening and came downstairs and told my parents. At dinner, my father said that was impressive. My mother asked if I'd need new luggage. The following morning, Bella announced she wanted to attend a wellness retreat she'd seen advertised on social media. A week at a resort in Arizona, $3,000, something about emotional recalibration and sound baths and rediscovering your authentic energy. She showed my mother the brochure, and my mother showed my father, and by Sunday the family had agreed to fund it. The conversation about my program's supplementary fees, $600, was tabled until we see how things look. I found the $600 myself, babysitting money saved over 4 months, combined with a small supplementary scholarship I had quietly applied for the week prior. I did not tell my parents, because I already understood that telling them would make me the difficult one, the one making things uncomfortable, the one who couldn't simply be grateful for what she had. Bella came home from Arizona with crystals and a new relationship with her authentic self. I came home with the beginning of a 4.0 GPA, a handful of academic contacts that would matter later, and a clear-eyed understanding of something I had been resisting for years. I was not going to be caught if I fell. No one in that house was positioned to catch me, not because they were cruel people, but because they had simply never built the infrastructure for it. They had built it entirely for Bella, and assumed that I, being the shark, being the reliable one, being the daughter who figured things out, did not require it. I decided at 16, sitting on a university campus 4 states away, with the smell of cafeteria coffee in the air and genuine excitement about everything I was learning, that this was workable, that I was more interested in what I could construct on top of that truth than in grieving it. That decision is the reason I was standing on a lawn this morning with the ability to make one phone call and bring an entire architecture down. I need to tell you about Eleanor Vance. I started university at 18 with a partial merit scholarship, a work-study placement, and the structural assumption that the $80,000 college fund was waiting for me at the end of it, like a bridge over the last section of difficult water. My father had told me specifically when I was 17, sitting at the kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon, "Maya, the money is safe. It's yours. It will be there when you need it." I had built my financial planning around that bridge. The loans I was carrying were manageable precisely because of it. Without it, the math changed considerably. I believed my father. I want to sit with that for a moment because it matters. I was not naive. I was not a person who trusted easily or built plans on foundations I hadn't tested. But my father had looked me in the eye and made a specific promise, and I had believed him because he was my father, and because I had not yet arrived at the particular knowledge that some people make promises with the full intention of keeping them right up until keeping them becomes inconvenient. I worked 3 jobs through my undergraduate years to cover what the scholarship didn't. Tuesday and Wednesday mornings, I was at the campus library, reshelving and cataloging. The particular quiet of that work, something I grew to love. The smell of old paper and the low institutional hum of the HVAC, and the sense of being surrounded by accumulated knowledge. Thursday evenings, I worked a dinner shift at a restaurant downtown. Polyester uniform, orange hand soap in the staff bathroom, a floor manager who communicated primarily through significant looks and never had enough people on the schedule. The clatter of forks and the controlled chaos of a full section on a Thursday night, and the satisfying arithmetic of a shift well executed. Friday afternoons, I assisted at an off-campus financial consulting satellite office that had a work-study arrangement with the university's business school. That last one is the one that changed everything. The office was a satellite of the Vance Group, a financial management and real estate consulting firm based downtown, mid-sized but exceptionally well-connected, run by a woman named Eleanor Vance. Eleanor was 54, precise, Harvard MBA, the kind of person who moves through a room with the efficiency of someone who decided long ago that wasted motion was a form of disrespect to her own time. She came into the satellite office twice a month to review the junior staff's work and assess the placement program. The third time she came in, I was there late, past 7, finishing a portfolio reconciliation task that had been sitting on the shared drive for 2 weeks because nobody else had wanted the tedium of it. Eleanor came in for a folder she'd forgotten and found me at the corner desk with a spreadsheet open and 3 reference documents spread across the table. She sat down across from me and asked what I was working on. I told her. She asked a follow-up question about my methodology. I answered it. She asked another. I answered that one too. We talked for 40 minutes. She left with her folder and a particular look on her face that I had learned, by then, to recognize. The look of someone who has just found something they were not expecting to find and is quietly deciding what to do with it. She came back the following month and asked for me by name. Over the next 3.5 years, Eleanor Vance became the truest mentor I have ever had. Not the performance of mentorship, not the version where someone occasionally offers encouragement and then lists you as a mentee on their LinkedIn profile. The real thing. She brought me into actual work, client portfolios, property assessments, risk analysis, the internal logic of how leveraged assets move, and what happens to the people who hold them when that movement is not what they planned. She explained her reasoning, not just her conclusions. She introduced me to people in her network with the specific and deliberate intention of accelerating what I was already building. By my junior year, I was doing work that would not have embarrassed a full-time associate. By my senior year, Eleanor had given me a formal title, junior partner, partial equity stake, a small office of my own 2 days a week, and the understanding between us was clear. When I graduated, I was coming on full-time. A future had been built, a real one, constructed from actual work in the actual world, mine in a way that nothing my parents could give or take had ever been. There was one other thing. 18 months ago, in the course of a routine portfolio review, I came across a file that made me stop entirely. The Vance Group managed several high-interest loan agreements on local real estate holdings. Among them was a package of properties belonging to a holding company called Sterling Residential LLC, my father's company, the same portfolio he referenced at dinner parties when he talked about being in real estate, the same holdings that funded the country club membership and the charity auction donations, and the Christmas card photos, and the smooth, curated surface of the Sterling family's life. I sat with that file for a long time. The loans were being carried, extended, renewed, the terms held favorable, just as a quiet courtesy, not written anywhere, not formal, just the kind of arrangement that exists between institutions and the people they have reason to accommodate. I had been that reason.
Eleanor knew whose daughter I was. She had known it since early in our working relationship, had put it together from a combination of the last name and a property address I had once used on a form. She had never said anything directly. She had simply continued extending the courtesy month after month, renewal after renewal, because I was there and I was producing, and she was a woman who rewarded loyalty with loyalty. I understood, sitting with that file, that I was holding something significant. I filed it away in the private interior space where I kept important things. I did not plan to use it. I went home and I made dinner, and I
Did not plan to use it. That was 18 months ago. The morning of graduation began ordinarily enough on the surface. My apartment was full of that specific mix of excitement and anxiety that attaches itself to days you've been working toward for years. The good kind of nervous, the kind that means something is real. I had pressed my graduation gown the night before, I had my diploma case ready, I had made coffee and stood at my kitchen window watching the early morning light on the street below and felt something close to peace. My parents had organized a pre-graduation brunch at the hotel where Diane's college friends were staying, the kind of event that was really for the audience rather than the graduate, a performance of family warmth staged for people whose opinions my mother had been carefully managing for 30 years. I arrived at 9:15 in my gown, diploma case in hand, and found the hotel ballroom already arranged with mimosas in a catered spread, and my mother moving through the room with the focused energy of a woman running an event she cares about very much. I was getting a glass of water near the service station when I heard my mother's voice from around the partition. She was with two of her friends. I recognized the voices, women she'd known since before I was born, women who had watched me grow up from a careful distance. My mother was laughing. I want you to understand the quality of that laugh. It was the relaxed laugh, the laugh she used when she was among people she trusted completely, when the front-facing version of herself could briefly come down and the real version could stretch its legs, the laugh of someone who has had a mimosa and feels secure in her audience. Bella just isn't built for the corporate world the way Maya is, she was saying. Maya is a shark. She doesn't need the help. She'll be fine. She's always fine. One of the friends said something I didn't catch. Bella needs a car and a cushion, my mother said. You know how she is. She needs a foundation or she'll fall apart. Maya will land on her feet. She always does. That's just who she is. More laughter, the sound of glasses. I stood on my side of the partition and I held my water glass and I felt something move through me that was not anger exactly. It was colder than anger, more structural than anger. The sensation of a final piece of information arriving and completing a picture you have been assembling for a very long time. They had not agonized over this decision. They had not lain awake weighing it. They had looked at two daughters and made a clean, unbothered calculation. One needs it, one doesn't, problem solved. They had not considered the loans I was carrying. They had not considered the 3 jobs or the $1,000 I had found myself when I was 16, or the 1,000 small negotiations I had made across 22 years to need less than I actually needed so that the resources could go to Bella. They had not considered any of it because they had never been required to consider it. I was the shark. I would be fine. I set down the water glass. I found my father near the entrance, phone in hand, scrolling through something with the distracted ease of a man who has nowhere in particular to be. I stood in front of him and I asked him, directly and without performance, whether the college fund was still intact. He didn't look up immediately. When he did, his expression was the particular arrangement of features a person makes when they're deciding how much of the truth to release. "You're being selfish, Maya," he said. "You have your degree. Your sister has nothing. It's about family unity." He said it with the confident delivery of a man reading from a script he has already rehearsed, as though the logic of it was self-evident, as though family unity was a phrase that explained and excused and concluded the conversation all at once. I looked at my father, at the easy set of his shoulders, the phone still half raised in his hand, and the absolute absence of guilt in his face, and I understood something I should have understood years earlier. He was never going to see it, not because he was incapable of understanding, but because understanding would have required him to feel something about 22 years of looking past me, and feeling that was not something he had any intention of doing.
I said nothing more to him. I walked out of the hotel and into the May morning, and I put my hand in my pocket, and I thought about Eleanor's office, and I thought about the Sterling residential file, and I thought about a blue ribbon sitting on a kitchen counter with nobody mentioning it. I walked to the ceremony. The graduation itself was beautiful in the specific way that things are beautiful when you know they're ending. The string quartet near the fountain, the rows of folding chairs filling steadily with families, the smell of cut grass and someone's gardenia perfume, and the polyester warmth of 100 graduation gowns in the late morning sun. I took my seat, I listened to the speeches, I thought about Eleanor. I thought about 3.5 years of Friday afternoons and late evenings and spreadsheets and the slow, patient accumulation of knowledge that turns into capability, that turns into leverage. I thought about what it meant to have built something real, something nobody could reclassify or redirect or wrap in a red bow and hand to someone else. When they called my name, I walked across that stage and I accepted my diploma, and I looked out at the audience and I watched my father clap. His hands were shaking slightly, I noticed that, the small tremor in the applause, the hands of a man who perhaps understood somewhere beneath the confidence that something had shifted in that hotel this morning, even if he couldn't name what it was yet. I stepped off the stage, and I took out my phone. I said, "Eleanor," my voice as steady and cold as the rain that once left me stranded at the library. "The favors are over. Call in the Vance Group loans on the Sterling properties, all of them. Effective immediately." A pause. "Are you certain?" she said. "Completely," I said. "Consider it done," she said. I put my phone back in my pocket. I straightened my gown, and I walked toward the after party at the country club that my parents had spent 3 weeks organizing to show the world exactly how well the Sterling family was doing.
I want to tell you about the specific quality of watching a carefully constructed world come apart in real time, because it is nothing like you imagine it will be. There is no satisfaction in the way you expect satisfaction to feel. It is quieter than that, more precise, like watching a very complicated equation finally balance. The country club event was at its height when the calls started, champagne being poured, the canapes making their rounds, my mother working the room with the practiced ease of a woman in her element. My father was near the bar with 2 men from his real estate network, laughing about something, expansive and confident, the lord of an afternoon that was performing exactly as planned. His phone buzzed. He looked at it, looked away, returned to the conversation. It buzzed again. And again, I watched from across the room as he excused himself and stepped toward the window and looked at his phone properly, and something moved across his face. Not comprehension yet, just the first signal of it, the way your body knows something is wrong before your mind has assembled the specific information. He made a call. I watched him listen. I watched the color leave his face in a way that was almost cinematic, that genuinely happened the way it happens in films, a slow, definitive draining, the gray replacing the warmth, the confident set of his jaw going uncertain. The bank had frozen the accounts, every one of them, personal, business, the holding company. The loans against the Sterling residential portfolio had been called in simultaneously, and the balances due were not numbers that could be managed by a phone call to a friendly contact, not at this notice, not all at once. The entire financial architecture that had been quietly sustained by Eleanor Vance's professional courtesy, the architecture my parents had been living inside for years without fully understanding who was holding it up, had been withdrawn. The luxury SUV, the one with the red bow, the one bought with $80,000 that belonged to me, had its payment flagged and reversed. The dealership was already attempting to contact my father. My mother found me first. She came across the room with a speed that broke through her usual composed navigation of a social event, and she grabbed my arm hard, the kind of grip that leaves marks, her fingers finding my forearm with the desperation of someone reaching for something solid as the ground moves. And her face was the face I had never seen before, makeup beginning to streak, eyes with the particular wild quality of genuine panic, not performed distress, not the managed tears
tears she produced when she wanted a response, but the real thing, the thing that happens when you understand that the floor you have been standing on was someone else's floor. Maya, something is wrong. The accounts are empty. They're saying we've defaulted. I looked at her hand on my arm. I looked at her face. And I said, in the same calm voice I had been cultivating for 22 years of absorbing things that deserved to be said, the voice I had built in libraries and restaurant shifts and late Friday evenings in a financial consulting office, I guess you'll have to figure it out, Mom. Maybe I'm just smart enough to know when to stop funding a family that erased me. She stared at me. I removed her hand from my arm gently, the way you remove something that doesn't belong where it's been placed. Across the room, I could see my father still at the window, phone pressed to his ear, one hand pressed flat against the glass as though he needed the wall to stay upright. I could see the two men from his real estate network exchanging a glance, the particular glance of people who have just registered that the man they were laughing with 30 minutes ago is in a situation they do not want to be adjacent to. Near the entrance, I could hear Bella's voice rising. She had gotten a call from the dealership, or someone had told her, or the valet had said something about the SUV. And the sound of it, that rising pitch, the performed distress escalating toward a scene, was so familiar and so exactly what it had always been that it almost felt like a closing
Parentheses, the punctuation at the end of a very long sentence. I did not stay for the cake. I did not stay to hear Bella's scene resolve or not resolve, to watch my parents begin the urgent work of explaining to their social circle why the afternoon had turned the way it had, to witness any more of the collapse than I had already witnessed. I had seen what I needed to see. I had said what I needed to say. I had done, with 2 sentences on a phone call, what 22 years of waiting and absorbing and taking up less space had never managed to do. I had made my presence in that family impossible to overlook. I picked up my diploma case from the table where I'd set it. I walked out of the country club and into the May afternoon. The sky had made its decision while we were inside, fully blue now. The white burned off, the kind of afternoon that is unambiguous about itself. I stood in the parking lot for a moment and felt the sun on my face and the solid weight of the diploma case in my hand, and the particular quiet solidity of a person who has arrived somewhere they built their own way to. I've thought a lot in the 2 weeks since about what I want to say about forgiveness, because people always ask about forgiveness, and I think the question deserves a real answer rather than a convenient one. Forgiveness is not a door I've closed. I don't carry what happened in that kitchen, in that hotel ballroom, in 22 years of blue ribbons sitting on counters with nobody mentioning them, as a weight I intend to drag through the rest of my life. That's not who I am, and it's not how I want to live. The bitterness my parents might expect me to carry would only ever burden me. It would never reach them. But forgiveness is a private matter. It happens inside a person, at its own pace, for their own peace. It is not the same as reconciliation. It is not the same as restored access. It is not the same as pretending that a foundation can be trusted again simply because someone is sorry the collapse was visible. The bank accounts are closed. Not as punishment, as boundary, as the simple structural reality of what happens when you spend 22 years treating someone's presence as a resource to be extracted, rather than a person to be known. My name is Maya Sterling. I am 22 years old, and I built every single thing that matters. Type karma in the comments if you believe the truth always finds a way to show up exactly when it's needed. Subscribe if you're not already, and tell me where you're watching from, city and local time, so I know we're not out here alone.